The bride slapped the contract onto my camera bag and said, "Your mother promised us this venue for Saturday." I looked at the date. Saturday was already booked. Not just booked, paid for, signed, and confirmed 6 months earlier. Then the bride pointed at the contract again. There was my name at the bottom. My signature. Except I had never seen that contract in my life. I'm Natalie Brooks, 35, a wedding photographer in Charlotte, North Carolina, and until that moment, I thought the worst thing my family had ever done was borrow money they never intended to return. I was about to discover they had been borrowing something much more valuable. My reputation. The venue belonged to my parents, Daniel and Susan Brooks. It was a restored farmhouse outside Charlotte that they had turned into a small wedding and event venue. I had helped them build it. For 4 years, I photographed weddings there, handled the website, answered inquiries, created albums, and occasionally stepped in when my parents couldn't manage a difficult client. My younger sister, Lauren, handled the decorations. Everyone had a role. Mine just happened to be the one nobody noticed until something went wrong. And something had gone very wrong. The bride standing in front of me was crying. Her fiancé was pacing behind her. And 36 wedding guests were already arriving. I called my mother. She answered on the 4th ring. "Natalie, don't start with me." I froze. "Mom, what did you promise these people?" "We discussed their date months ago." "No, their date was never available." She sighed. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be." I looked at the contract again. My name was printed beneath the words venue representative. Then I noticed something. The signature wasn't just similar to mine. It was my old signature. The one I had stopped using 3 years earlier. My stomach dropped. "Mom," I said quietly, "where did you get this signature?" She hung up. That was when I knew this wasn't a scheduling mistake. It was something else. I spent the next 2 hours helping the bride find another venue while my parents dealt with the angry guests. The wedding was eventually moved. But the bride posted a review that night. It said the venue had accepted her money, promised her a date, and then abandoned her. My name was mentioned twice. Within 48 hours, 3 inquiries disappeared. Then one of my regular corporate clients called and said they needed to pause our relationship until things were clarified. I sat at my kitchen table staring at my phone. My entire business depended on trust. One bad review could hurt. A pattern could destroy me. And someone in my family had apparently been using my name to make promises I never made. I went to my parents' house the following morning. Lauren was already there. She looked nervous. That was unusual. Lauren could lie with a smile. That morning she couldn't look at me. I put a folder on the table. "Show me every contract with my signature." Mom immediately became defensive. "Why are you treating us like criminals?" "Because someone used my signature without my permission." Dad finally spoke. "Natalie, nobody was trying to hurt you." That sentence told me more than he intended. I stared at him. "Who was trying to use my name?" Nobody answered. Then Lauren whispered, "Mom." My mother turned toward her. "Don't." Lauren stood up. "I've had enough." The room went silent. Lauren told me the venue had been struggling financially for almost a year. Not because the weddings weren't profitable. Because Mom had been taking deposits from clients and using part of that money to cover old debts. She would then book another wedding before the first event came due. A temporary solution. Then another. Then another. The problem was that some dates had been sold twice. And when clients complained, Mom used my name because she believed people would trust a professional photographer more than a small family venue. I felt sick. "How many contracts?" Lauren looked at the floor. 23. I sat down. 23. Not one mistake. Not one bad weekend. 23 families had received paperwork that appeared to come from me. Then Dad added the part that hurt most. "Your mother thought you could fix it." I laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because I didn't know what else to do. "Fix what?" Mom looked at me. The venue. There it was. My family didn't see what happened to me as damage. They saw me as the emergency fund. My reputation was another resource they could spend. I asked for every financial record. Mom refused. So I left. That night, I called an attorney. I also contacted the payment processor that handled the venue's deposits. That's where I found the first surprise. Several deposits had been refunded from an account that wasn't connected to the venue. They had been transferred into an account under my mother's name. But the amounts didn't match the contracts. Someone had been moving money around. I started making a spreadsheet. Dates, names, deposits, refunds, signatures, bank transfers. The more I entered, the stranger it became. Then I noticed something. Every questionable contract involved a particular type of client. Couples who had complained about prices. Clients who had asked for refunds. People Mom considered difficult. She hadn't randomly misused my name. She had deliberately used it when she needed to make a situation disappear quickly. Then I found a contract for a wedding scheduled 3 months earlier. The couple had paid a $7,500 deposit. The contract showed my signature. The couple had later canceled. According to the venue records, the deposit was refunded. Except the bank statement showed only $2,500 had been returned. Where was the other $5,000? I called the couple. They told me they had received a full refund. That made no sense. Until I looked at the account again. The missing $5,000 had been transferred to a company called Bluebird Events LLC. I recognized the name. It belonged to Lauren. I called her. She answered crying. Please don't tell Mom I talked to you. I sat down. Lauren, what is Bluebird Events? Silence. Then she said, it's mine. My heart sank. She explained that Mom had convinced her to create the company because the venue's bank accounts were temporarily restricted. But Lauren had never seen the full financial records. Mom had been routing deposits through Lauren's company. Then Lauren discovered something worse. The venue owed almost $68,000 in unpaid taxes, vendor bills, and disputed refunds. I asked the question I didn't want to ask. Did Dad know? Lauren started crying harder. Yes. That was the moment something inside me finally changed. I'd spent years thinking my parents were irresponsible. They weren't. They were organized enough to hide it. The next morning, I met with my attorney. We contacted the affected clients whose contracts contained my unauthorized signature. We documented everything. I separated my photography business completely from the venue. Then I did something my family never expected. I resigned. Not from a job. From the role they had assigned me. I told my parents they could no longer use my name, photographs, website, client list, equipment, or reputation. Mom called me selfish. Dad called me dramatic. Lauren called me scared. I told Lauren she needed her own attorney. Then I stopped answering family calls. 3 days later, my mother sent me a message. If you don't come to the venue Saturday, you're abandoning your family. Saturday was the venue's biggest event of the month. 32 guests. A corporate anniversary party. And my mother had apparently told them I would be their photographer. I wasn't booked. I had never agreed. But my name was on the contract. Again. So I went. Not to photograph the event. To end it. I arrived with my attorney. Mom saw me through the window and immediately walked outside. You actually came. Yes. Her face softened. I knew you'd do the right thing. I looked at her. No, Mom. That's the problem. You knew I'd do what you wanted. Her expression hardened. We are family. And that's why you thought my name was yours to use. She started crying. But this time I didn't rush to comfort her. I handed her a folder. Inside were copies of every contract containing my unauthorized signature. Then bank records. Then the payment transfers. Then the client statements. Her face changed page by page. Dad came outside. He looked at the documents. Then he looked at Mom. You told me the refunds were handled. Mom said nothing. That was the first time I'd ever seen my father realize that he had believed a story because it was easier than asking questions. Then Lauren arrived. She had her own attorney. Mom stared at her. You too. Lauren was shaking. But she said something I'd never heard her say before. I'm not doing this anymore. Mom looked at both of us. 2 daughters. 2 different ways she'd used us. And suddenly she wasn't looking at us like children anymore. She was looking at us like witnesses. The corporate party still happened. The guests never knew the entire story. I arranged another photographer for them and made sure the event ran smoothly. Then I went home. I expected to feel victorious. I didn't. I felt exhausted. Because boundaries don't always feel like revenge. Sometimes they feel like grief. 6 weeks later, the venue closed temporarily. My parents sold the farmhouse. The debts were negotiated. Lauren shut down Bluebird events. My parents had to face the financial consequences they had been avoiding. I didn't lose everything. My photography business survived. In fact, something unexpected happened. The bride whose wedding had been disrupted months earlier contacted me. I thought she wanted to complain again. Instead, she said, "I heard what happened. I know now that you weren't the one who made those promises." Then she asked if I would photograph her anniversary party. I almost cried. Not because of the booking. Because she trusted me again. I accepted. That evening, I sat on my porch looking through old wedding photographs. There were thousands. Couples laughing. Parents crying. Fathers seeing their daughters in wedding dresses. People promising forever. For years, I'd thought my job was capturing people's happiest moments. I realized I'd learned something more important. A photograph freezes what happened. It doesn't change what happened. And neither does family. You can love people and still refuse to let them rewrite reality. Months later, Dad called. He asked if we could meet. I agreed. We sat at a small coffee shop. He looked older. Tired. "I should have stopped your mother," he said. "Yes." He nodded. "I know." There was no excuse. No speech. Just two uncomfortable words. "I know." Then he asked if there was any way we could rebuild our relationship. I told him there could be. But it wouldn't look like before. He asked what that meant. No borrowed money. No using my business. No signing anything for someone else. No secrets. He smiled sadly. "That's a lot of rules." "No." I looked directly at him. "Those are just boundaries." He nodded. We didn't hug. Not that day. But when I got up to leave, he paid for my coffee. I almost laughed. He looked confused. "What?" "Nothing." I walked outside. My family didn't magically become perfect. Mom and I still don't speak regularly. Lauren and I are rebuilding our relationship slowly. Dad calls every Sunday. And I have learned not to confuse forgiveness with permission. A year after everything happened, I photographed another wedding at a completely different venue. The bride asked me if I had any advice. I thought about my mother, my father, Lauren, the contracts, the fake signatures, and the woman I had been before all of it happened. Then I told her, "Don't promise forever just because you're afraid someone will leave." She looked surprised. I smiled. Make sure the people around you respect the person you are today. That night, I came home and found an envelope waiting on my porch. It was from my mother. Inside was one page. No apology. No request. Just a list. Every dollar she still owed me. Every client whose money had been mishandled. Every expense she'd hidden. At the bottom she'd written, "I'm finally keeping my own books." I sat there for a long time. Then I folded the paper and put it away. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was something I'd never expected from her. Accountability. And for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for what happened next. I went inside. My camera was charging on the kitchen counter. Tomorrow, another couple would stand in front of me and promise to build a life together. I would photograph them. But this time, I understood something I hadn't understood when I was 30. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a family is stop letting them spend you like you're theirs.